Hello and welcome to From the Be-All End, the Burnley podcast. A slightly later edition this week due to one or two logistical issues, and unfortunately still one or two of our squad members on the sidelines and not available for selection. I'm Andrew Greaves, but I am delighted to say that we have the returning beast, Mr. Simon Evans, after a couple of international trips over the last couple of episodes, and an ever-present Justin Connolly. How are we both?
Good, thank you. Yeah.
Excellent. Plenty to chat about this week on this week's episode. We've got a new contract for Lyle Foster, our straight line runner, and we'll chat about that in a second. And we've also got a preview of the Bournemouth game, which appears to be even more important than we thought it was going to be before last week's defeat to Brentford. And there's also an interesting story that came out last night, latest last night, that ALK are looking at doing a deal with Dundee, a talent sharing agreement with Dundee. Looks like the Belgian acquisition has gone by the wayside and we're looking a little bit closer to home. So we'll talk about that. But let's start with Lyle Foster. He's pretty much been our man of the season so far. I know he's won the man of the match award on at Turf Moor pretty much every game we've played, and he's played. He's won the accolade on Up the Clarets, I think, pretty much every week, and has now been rewarded with a new improved deal. Keeps him at the club an extra year on top of his previous contract, so he's going to be around until 2028. But I guess, Justin, it kind of secures his future, gives him, I guess, better terms, which you would expect, given the impact he's had. But it also, again, smart move, perhaps a little bit in contrast to how we've played things before, tying down talent to longer contracts to protect the investment as well, isn't it?
Oh, I think it is that. I mean, obviously, it's great news. I think he's been one of the bright spots in an otherwise quite dark start to the season. But it is a vote of confidence in him, obviously. But I think it is probably more to do with protecting the investment than anything else. Obviously, we don't want him banging the goals in and then suddenly arriving at a summer window with just a year left on his deal. You know, in that scenario, we'd probably be selling him for less than he's worth. So it's sort of, like you say, it's a contrast to what we have done in the past. It means that, you know, we're protected against that for the foreseeable future. But I mean, this is just the latest in a few of these sort of deals, isn't it? I think Zaroury and Benson both signed new contracts early on in the season.
Cullen as well. But I just hope. I mean, I'm sure they're not that stupid, but I hope the potential for relegation is factored into these new deals that they've been handing out. I mean, obviously we don't want to be too pessimistic, but that is still a possibility, and we don't want to go down and have a load of players on long Premier League contracts that we won't be able to afford. You know, we've seen what can happen to other clubs when that kind of thing happens. I mean, I'm sure the owners are well aware of that and have guarded against it, but that's my only real worry about it. I think tying down our best talent onto longer contracts is a win for the club and a win for the players as well. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And Simon, I think it probably is. These deals were probably always going to be signed, weren't they, on promotion? It does feel like a lot of them were perhaps players were signed in the Championship with, you know, look, if we get promoted, this triggers that. There's a bit of negotiations to be done. But like Justin said, you would expect it to be the other way as well, that if we are to go down this season, I'm still convinced we won't be. And we'll perhaps discuss that a little later. But protecting investment, but also protecting the future financials, you think would be paramount, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think what they are is a pay rises for footballers. You know, it's when you get promoted, you're obviously going to go on to Premier League wages. And the way you announce that is with a new contract, which obviously you do have to do a new contract as well. So in that sense, it's not that remarkable, really, that all these players are being given these new contracts. And I certainly hope Justin is right that they've included the reverse aspect of it as well. But it's good news, I mean, why not? I mean, it makes sense. And let's hope that, let's hope really that, Lyle Foster does well enough that we're getting people coming in with 2 years left on his contract and saying, we want this guy, and hopefully we can hold on to him. But
100 million.
If you look, if you look at the players we've signed in the summer who obviously are on fresh Premier League contracts, there won't be many of them will have increased their value so far this season. But I think Lyle Foster certainly will have.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's interesting looking at some of the comments. I don't know if anyone saw the comments from Lyle Foster. He talked about falling in love with Turf Moor in terms of the fans, meeting lots of good people, the way we do things, the way we go about things. It's clear he's bought into the project. I mean, he had a really difficult start, didn't he, last season? I think we all said, actually from a performance point of view, I think he would admit he didn't really hit the ground running. But we saw in the documentary, Vincent Kompany was very much kind of, look, he's a signing for the Premier League. He's suited to the Premier League. We knew pretty much in January we were going to get promoted or the possibility was high. There were flashes last season, weren't there, of that kind of playing on that last defender, but it's difficult in the Championship. He's clearly settled. I mean, he talked in the summer about his mental health struggles as well. He looks like that burden's been lifted. He looks like he's playing with freedom. He's certainly an asset at both ends of the field, isn't he, Justin?
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt about that. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? I think the project clearly is to buy in this young talent with potential, get them playing, to a higher level, then sell them on. That's the business model that we're going for, isn't it? And he seems to be a perfect example of that, of identifying this talent using whatever statistical AI analysis or whatever it is, however it is that they do it. It's not going to come off every time, but certainly in terms of Foster, it does seem to be coming off. There are players like that, aren't there, that sort of struggle a little bit in the Championship. I mean, don't forget he came into a winning side and a side that was doing really well, a side that was creating a lot of chances and scoring a lot of goals, and he did struggle a little bit. But this season, he seems like a different player. I think he was the one we all sort of identified at the start of the season and expected a little bit more of him. But I think he's even surpassed our expectations of him, and he looks a real talent.
I think, one of the things he struggled with last year was, quite rightly, really, Kompany looked at that situation when we signed him, and the Barnes thing through the middle and the J-Rod thing through the middle were working for the wingers and so on. So when we saw Foster, quite often he was playing in a wide position, wasn't he? He was, or if he came on as a sub, he came on for Zarori or Benson, and that's clearly not his best role. So it was almost like a situation like Sean used to do with players like Tarkovsky or Charlie Taylor or whatever, where they were basically he was serving a bit of time, wasn't he? I think he was serving his 6 months time before he got a chance as centre forward. My only sort of question mark still about Foster really is he's shown everything everyone said about him has been true, but we've been playing in games where we haven't had a lot of ball in the final third. And he does play off that last man, and he likes to play that. That can sometimes be a limiting factor. That's really good to have when you're under the cosh and you're going on the way out. But if you're getting a lot of the ball, which is not a problem that we're going to probably have for a while, but if you're getting a lot of ball in the final third, you want maybe a little bit more movement and a little bit more smarts and stuff from your number 9, which I haven't seen yet from him. He's very strong. Physically, literally very strong,
Arguably, though, would you say the Spurs game? I mean, the way he gets across his man for his goal, it's that's quite smart. Yeah. I think what he has got, and I mentioned that kind of on the last man kind of thing. I think what he has got though is that a bit of creativity. I mean, that Chelsea goal is the perfect example of that. He just drives at him, and he drives right across the front of the box, and then that opens up that gap for Koleos, not for Koleos or Odegaard, isn't it? So I agree with you, Simon. I think and maybe Saturday, given Bournemouth's run is very similar to us and their inabilities to defend and keep the ball. I don't know who's going to have the ball on Saturday because I don't think either of us have much of it. It's going to be alien to both of us. But I just wonder whether, and I have got visions in my head of the club website's match report saying, Lyle Foster celebrated signing a new contract with the brace as the Clarets picked up their second win of the season. You've heard it here first. Lyle Foster,
only
two
a
or
brace.
more goals. Yeah, 2 or more goals on your Betfair account. You'll be absolutely laughing. Other betting companies are available. But I wonder if this is the kind of game where we might start to see what he's capable of against, a team in our mini league, shall we say. We kind of saw it a little bit against Forest, didn't we? The way he gets in front for his goal that gets disallowed. We saw it a little bit against Luton, but I agree with you, Simon. Number 9 play, he's a very smart, very kind of clever attacker, but straightforward number 9. We've yet to see it, have we?
No, we haven't, and it might be there, and the way we play, we might not need it to be particularly like that. You certainly don't want him to be dropping deep all the time and trying to turn into a Harry Kane or anything. That's not what I'm talking about. But just a little bit more to his game. Let's see. But his work rate has been fantastic. That's really stood out, and I think that's one of the reasons that you'll always do well with Burnley fans if you're somebody who chases a lost cause and looks like you're really putting it in all the time. And he is one of those players, and that's good. And I think Company will really appreciate that and hope that he sort of sets the tone a little bit more for the rest of the team, because that's clearly something which is not ultra tactical and not complicated that we need to see a bit more of, is that sort of really putting it in physically and putting the miles in, and he's been doing that really, really well, and he's got goals, so he's been doing his job. Let's put it that way. And not many players are on that field can put their hands up so far this season and say, yeah, I've done my job.
And obviously, in contrast to last season, where he sort of looked a little bit disappointing in a very good team that was doing very well, this season he's doing really well in a team that otherwise isn't shining as brightly as they might do. I mean, I'm not sure about this. I think he's pretty good with his back to goal and knocking it off to the wide players. I think he's shown a little bit of that, but it's like you say, we haven't had that much of the ball this season. I think he's well capable of doing it in all areas and switching it. He's got the pace to hurt them when the ball's going beyond the line, but also he's got the strength when it comes into his feet to hold the ball up and bring all the players into it. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do in a game where we might have a little bit more of the ball. I think that is going to be interesting.
Definitely. Let's take a quick break, and then when we come back, we will discuss the next game, the 6-pointer. We don't like to call them 6-pointers in October, but it is starting to feel like that, against Bournemouth. So we'll be back after this. So after the 3-0 defeat to Brentford last week, it does feel like the trip to the Vitality tomorrow, Saturday, is going to be even more important than we thought it was going to be. We do need to start picking up results, don't we, Simon?
Absolutely, desperately need to start picking up results. I mean, it is a 6-pointer. There's no doubt about it. We need to beat teams like this, and they're in a poor run of form. You look at their results, and they're really not that dissimilar to ours. They've been convincingly beaten by the big teams, and they've had disappointing results like ours against Brentford. And it's a game where if we lose this one, you're really starting to feel despondent. So something needs to be got out of it. And it's stupid to say ideally a win but you'd take a draw, but just not losing this game would at least stem a little bit that sense of free fall. I think that has to be stopped. And they haven't looked good, and they've had a few injury problems as well. I know the main signing in the summer was Tyler Adams, wasn't it? The American midfielder from Leeds, and he's been out injured all season, and he's a good player. So they'll be missing that. new manager coming in, I didn't know what to make of that when Bournemouth decided to go the route they did with it. The clubs that brought in clubs in our position in the bottom third mini league who bring in Spanish managers haven't tended to do that well, have they? Really, if you look at Watford, I've probably had half a dozen of them over the years. It didn't seem a good fit, that one. But they've got. I listened to an interview not so long since with Bournemouth's American owner, and he makes Alan Pace sound like a sort of cautious, modest man. Really, he's like he's definitely thinking big, as they do. And I wonder if they might have got that one wrong. But let's see how we cope with it, because there's a lot of things need to be sorted out.
Yeah, interestingly, Justin, Vincent Kompany probably seemed as upbeat as I've heard him in a pre-match press conference. I took a look at the footage of that. He talks about mentality. He talks about kind of, wanting to get things right. We've kind of urged pragmatism from Kompany. Is this the game where we might see, we saw Charlie Taylor come in early in the season and that ended up giving us the result we wanted? Is this one of those games where we see a little bit more pragmatism from the boss? Maybe a Jack Cork, maybe dropping the 12 up front or whatever we end up going with, and leaving Trafford at the back with a bunch of people twiddling the thumbs. Is this? I mean, it feels like the game where we should be. I think it's fair to say this will be one of the games on mine and Vinny's chart, which is must not lose, 3 points, orange marker pen. But so was last week's, and we didn't use pragmatism, and we got unpicked.
I don't know. I think last week people were saying, weren't they, that Brentford game was the start of a run of games that we might get a little bit more out of. I was never. Yeah, but I was not. I always thought Brentford were a lot better side than their sort of league position was suggesting, and I wasn't all that surprised. I was surprised. We've touched on this already about the Brentford game. It's the first time this season that I can think of that we seem to have really dropped our heads when things started going wrong. Even when we were getting smashed by the big teams, we always seem to be up for having a go. And Lyle Foster's like the epitome of that, isn't he? He always seems to be having a go. But the rest of the players against Brentford seem to drop their heads. So I think the phrase that Kompany used in his press conference is the one that they always trot out in situations like this. We need to get back to basics. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about, isn't it? Sort of a bit of pragmatism in terms of sort of perhaps not being quite so aggressive going forward and, being a bit tighter at the back. I think it all comes down to that midfield. We talked about it after the Brentford game, didn't we? That the midfield is so light and so weak that it means you don't get enough service to the front players and you put your back line under too much pressure. But, so we need extra bodies in there to help. It cannot be Cullen and Berger. We decided that quite a while ago, but I think he needs to get somebody else in there, and this is the perfect game to try and do it. I don't think it's I think it is a must-win game. I think they haven't won a game yet, have they? I don't think.
No.
And I think they're the only side in the division who's scored fewer goals than we have, and they've shipped quite a lot of goals as well. And on paper, I don't think their start's been quite as difficult as ours. I know they've
not quite. No,
they've lost they've been smashed by Spurs and Liverpool, I think, and Arsenal maybe. But I think they've also been beaten quite badly by Everton and Wolves. So they're.
I think it was Everton's first win, wasn't it? So Everton went into that game on the back of, bad form and ended up picking up a convincing win 3-0. I think it was down at their place.
So the best results are 0-0 against Chelsea that they got at home. In mid, that.
So it's a game we could be winning, and it's a game we should be winning. If we don't get 3 points out of games like this, that sort of safety target that we're talking about, it'll look a lot further away without the 3 points that we should be getting from this game, I think.
I think, one of the things in terms of like the pragmatism, I think it was the Forest game when Taylor came back, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, Goodmanson played it in that game as well.
He did,
and I think and we talked about it at the time, how he gives that degree of extra stability to the midfield, because as well as having the central two, whoever they may be, Cullen Brownhill, I think it was on that occasion, he. Goodmanson was coming back and he was covering defensively and doing a lot of like unheralded work off the ball. And defensive work as well, but still able to be on the edge of the box to put a ball in and so on. I think he's been a big miss, actually, because that option is something that you're not going to get at the moment from Trezor and Odebear or Koleosho. They're not going to be tracking back on the opposite side of the field, helping out Charlie Taylor or something. And if he's not fit still, then I do wonder if Redmond doesn't come into the picture to do that, to sort of be a player who, yes, gives you an option out wide, but will also be part of a midfield unit. Because for me, the fundamental problem with the way we're playing with two wingers at the moment is it is effectively 4-2-4, because they're not part of a midfield unit. They're much more out there on their own or part of the attack, really. So I would be looking at something, hoping, if I'm looking when that team sheet comes out, and not to have that sinking feeling from Kompany again, and have that feeling of, maybe, he's thinking along the same lines as the rest of us, would be to see something like a Redmond in that midfield, or if Goodmanson was fit, he'd be straight in for me.
I agree with that. I think Redmond in the Goodmanson position. I think Goodmanson is still out, looking at the kind of injury list. I do wonder whether Brun Larson also is a bit more of a Goodmanson style
possibly
winger, in terms of being somebody who can drift inside but will also track back. He's certainly got a lot of energy. But I agree. I did wonder.
Well, if we saw him for more than 15 or 20 minutes, we'd have a better idea, wouldn't we?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think I'm desperate to see him, and I think that's one of them. Whenever he comes on, you kind of get a bit of urgency out of him. But with the urgency comes that little bit more experience. It becomes almost the urgency from a Koleosho or an Odebear comes with the brain working faster than the feet, or the feet working faster than the brain, because the experience hasn't calibrated the two. Whereas with Brun Larson, I feel like there's an urgency, but there's a purpose and there's an execution. I floated this pre-season when we were thinking about left back issues. Could Redmond come in as a right back against the Bournemouth? I just wonder whether at his age, with his experience, he's right-footed, but he's played left or right.
Yeah.
I just wonder whether, with Roberts missing, and we discussed Roberts' stupidity in the debrief.
Still haven't got over that, have you?
Honestly, mate, I'm ripping still. It pisses me off to high heavens. I wonder whether Redmond at right back.
Yeah.
With perhaps, because the other option is Vitinho. So do you put Vitinho in front of Redmond, or do you put Redmond in front of Vitinho? Because actually, I like Vitinho, perhaps not as much as Vincent Kompany likes Vitinho. Another one who signed a new contract, don't forget. But I just wonder whether Redmond adds a bit of experience to that back line, if it is going to be Alderkirk, O'Shea, Taylor. At least at both sides, you've got people with over 100 Premier League games under the belt for a number of different clubs, and Redmond is very, very versatile. I just wonder whether, I don't know, I floated it pre-season.
It's an interesting one, there, yeah. It's an interesting
Redmond
one.
At right back.
Has he ever played there before? I don't think I've seen him play it.
Well, probably not, mate, but...
So you're thinking like a sort of Ashley Young thing with him, really? Yeah, I mean,
that's exactly what I'm thinking. I've got my board out at home. I've got my tactics board. I'm sitting in front of it. I'm scratching my head. I'm wondering what... I'm looking for options, and we've not got very many, but I'm trying to be creative but pragmatic.
Well, it injects a much more experience into the side, that's for sure. And this is one of the things we were talking about in the transfer window when we were looking at signing Townsend and players like that. We were going, we're going to need, with all these young, inexperienced players, we're going to need a bit of experience. It seems strange to me that Redmond was brought in, but hasn't really seen that much action, has he? He's not really. I
think he's had one or two niggly injuries, hasn't he? I think he has been out injured with the odd knock. But I agree with you. I think I'd have liked to have seen him start a couple of games, because surely this is how Koleosho learns. This is how Audebart learns, by a player who Guardiola, let's not forget, was had several tactical discussions with, shall we say, after City Southampton games. I just wonder whether and sometimes experience is all you need, isn't it? The Bournemouth game is not going to be about. Let's be honest, it's not going to be a great game for the neutral. It's going to be a war of attrition. It's going to come down to who makes the better decisions, who makes the least amount of mistakes. I think that's fair to say. It might be a moment of genius that wins it, but it's not. It is going to be one where experience is going to count so much. And Bournemouth just have one or two players who are the kind of old ugly heads within that side, who I just think if we don't, that's perhaps going to be our undoing.
Well, I think whether he can play right back or not, only Company knows from the training ground if he's looked at that or spoken to him and so on. But in terms of him being in the team and playing in his more natural position, if he's not going to come in after that performance last week and inject a bit of experience in Nous into our midfield, then he's basically not really figuring in the plans, is he? Yeah. So I think I would bring him in for this game for sure. And I'd also be tempted to bring Cork in for this one as well, and just see if we can't just even, we've got so many options from the bench that even if it overcompensates and goes with a little bit like, we're not quite as many options going forward. If we leave Amdouni out for Cork or something like that and strengthen the midfield, and we get to the 55th minute mark and it's 0-0, fine. And you then decide to go for the win and throw on your wing, fine. If we can get to 0-0 after 55 minutes, I'm happy, however badly we've played.
Absolutely.
In the current run of form, if we can just grind ourselves into a position and then go and win it in the last 20 minutes, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah, and we've definitely got the players that can do that can come off the bench and have an impact, haven't we? We've got those players. If we can keep it solid for like the first hour, then, if Koleosho is sitting this one out again, he's going to terrify people coming on for the last half an hour, isn't he? So, yeah, maybe that's the way to go. I'm not sure about. I'd rather see Brownhill come in back in than Cork. I just think he's got a bit more of that mobility about him, and it sort of is a bit of an insurance policy for Cullen, isn't it?
Definitely. I just wanted to ask you two about something that has come out. Craig Bellamy was on the overlap this week with Gary Neville. It's quite interesting. I've just watched the first bit where they're at the Cube in Manchester taking on some weird challenges against each other. But he does talk about Burnley, and Gary Neville does ask him if the club is going to change the style of play after a poor start. And I believe this was filmed before the Brentford game, but Bellamy says, no chance. Why would we change? We've just got to get better without the ball. We're leaving too many gaps when we haven't got the ball, which is true. By being compact and being a unit, it ends up working like a machine. Last season felt like a machine, didn't it? It felt like whenever there was a loose ball, we were the first to it. Is it as simple as saying, look, the style of play is not the issue. It's the gaps when we've not got the ball. Or does the style of play at this level mean that it is nigh on impossible to close those gaps because the standard of players you're up against will fill those gaps much quicker and much better than you? Simon, what do you think about that?
Well, show me a team outside of Liverpool, Man City, and maybe one or two other top six teams who successfully play with a 4-2-4 formation with two out-and-out wingers in the Premier League. They don't. You had teams like Spurs who've had excellent wide players when Kane was there and they were playing with Son on one wing and Kulusevski on the other, or Richarlison and so on. They play a three like that. They don't play, with an Amdouni making it into a four or anything. I just don't think that formation that we used at the weekend, 4-2-4, is going to work. I think if we go out there with out-and-out wingers, however good they might be or potential they might be, if we don't have enough bodies in the centre of midfield, and that doesn't sound very tactical and, zonal or anything like that, about just to save bodies in the midfield, but I think it is that basic. I mean, I just think it's way too open, way too adventurous to play that way. And it doesn't mean we can't play the style of football that company's trying to do, but we don't need to do it with 2 out-and-out wingers. You know, I've one on one side and keep it tight on the other, you know, or just a bit more of a balance and a bit more caution about it. And I think that's essential, to be honest. I think if we carry on like, he has to change that, I think.
I think that's true. But I also am a little bit confused by this idea that we're not going to change the way we play, because we have changed the way we've played. You know, we've played different. We've played different formations. We've played different personnel. We've ground out results. We've shown that we can do things differently. So this idea that we're going to stick to our principles confuses me a little bit, because, like I said, we have changed, and when we have got the results, we've somehow sometimes had to dig a little deeper. We've sometimes had to play a little bit longer. We've sometimes had to, mix things up, and company makes a bit of a big deal about that, doesn't he? I like these grind them out.
Yeah, he often says that. Yeah,
he often says that. So it's like, well, maybe it is tweaks to what we're trying to do, but there's no glory in being inflexible about how you set up, about how you tackle the opposition. Every game requires a slightly different approach, doesn't it? So this weird sort of obsession with, we're going to stick to our principles when we haven't even really shown that that's what we do is a little bit counterproductive. I think it sort of sets up the expectations, and I think like as we've said before today, this game against Bournemouth is unlikely to be a classic, is it? It's two teams who are scrapping for points, and I think if we go all out with the 4-2-4, pressing the fullbacks and trying to get the ball forward, and basically what we're trying to do is steamroll opposition with our sort of pace and possession, we're likely to come undone again. So you do have to adapt to the circumstances, and you do have to adapt to the opposition. It's foolish and foolhardy to think anything other than that, I think.
Yeah, and it's like you hear this word philosophy used all the time as well in football, and I really don't like when people use philosophy, because I think it's a misuse of the word. What they're talking about more is an ideology, yeah? And it seems the danger with all ideologies is that they become dogmas. And if they become a dogma while they're failing, you end up, with what happened to various political systems that were set up in as alternatives to capitalist democracies. You end up, collapsing like Eastern Europe did. And
Christ, I never thought we were going to go down this road, but go on.
But that's the danger if we make a dogma out of it. It's not
true. Yeah,
playing good football. The principles are surely get the ball on the ground, find men with feet, keep possession, and so on. It's not about which players are on which side of the field or how advanced they are up the field. It's surely trying to get it down and play football. We're not a long ball team. We get that. That's fine. That's an overall idea of how we're trying to play. But let's not turn it into a dogma, because if we do that, it's just going to end up looking ridiculous if we stick to a dogma all through this year, and companies stood there in March after we've shipped 4 against some team in the bottom third, and he's like, no, we're not changing our philosophy. No, let's have a degree of pragmatism here. A pragmatic approach is always trump over ideology, in my opinion.
And also that's where players like Redmond come in with their experience, isn't it? Because they are flexible on the pitch, because they understand how games ebb and flow, and they can solve problems on the pitch that maybe the younger players who haven't seen everything like he's seen, in a way they can't do. So that's another reason to pack the team with a little bit more experience, and maybe Cork's another player in that category, isn't he, that can sort of go, right, this is what we need to do now on the pitch, showing that leadership that you perhaps not going to get from some of the younger players.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. I think, and it does, we've mentioned it several times. It goes back to what George Boyd said. It goes back to what Mickey Phelan said, the Premier League is all about players making the right decisions at the right time and the big decisions. Can you expect a guy who's only played 75 minutes of La Liga football in 6 substitute appearances before coming to Burnley, can you expect him to have the experience to make the big decision, the right decision at the right time? Probably not. If your team is then filled with talented footballers, but who don't have the experience to make big decisions, key decisions, right decisions, split-second decisions, that's kind of what we've seen, isn't it? You know, with the horror show from Alderkirk against whoever it was, I can't remember who it was, Spurs, with, you know, Ramsey perhaps a couple of times when he's lost the ball. It is a learning curve, and we get that. And we've said before, evolution, not revolution, feels like the best fit to blood these players in. It just, to me, feels like everything we were told pre-season by people who'd been there, people who'd done it, people in Mick's case who'd won it several times. It seemed obvious that we were going to start the season, and the season was going to be predominantly the players who'd never let us down last season, with a smattering every now and again of the young players, and that would give us exactly that template that they both talked about, the experience to make the right decisions. You know, it's why Redmond looked a smart signing. You know, it's why Sander Berge looked a smart signing a little bit later. You know, because there were people who'd been there and done it, and it just feels like the philosophy has overtaken the purpose, doesn't it, a little bit?
The other thing is playing that kind of, extreme possession football, if you want to call it that. It's a lot harder to do that in the Premier League. And one of the things is the teams that do it well, they do it with two-touch football. You know, if you watch how City play, their midfield, they control it and move it, Some of them can do it in one touch as well, which is obviously when you're starting to get to real top-end footballers. We don't have players who can do that, unfortunately, in our midfield and other parts of the team at the back, two-touch like that. We want 3 or 4 touches, and that's when we get caught in possession and so on. And so that's where a degree of pragmatism needs to be there, because you could do that in the Championship. You did get that opportunity to sort of, you know, look at how Cullen's performance is. He hasn't become a worse player. He's in a completely different environment, and the amount of time he wants on the ball compared to what he's actually getting is part of the problem. Not that he's like the biggest part of the problem at all, but just to highlight that. So, you know, there's a degree of realism there. You know, Kompany, maybe it's dawning on him as well that the talent that he's brought in isn't quite as good as he'd hoped for in terms of their learning speed. Yeah, because we saw him last year really coach these players up to the level he wanted very, very quickly. I mean, that was the most astonishing thing about it, really, was how quickly it went from those performances like the Blackpool one early in the season to games where we were just utterly dominant and never going to lose. And it's clearly not going to be like that this year. He's not able to turn some of these signings into that level of dominant player in the Premier League. So it absolutely requires some pragmatism. I don't think there's any doubt about it. And I want to see that in the team sheet on Saturday and not have that sinking feeling of, oh my goodness, he's doing it again.
Definitely. Right, just because it was so successful before the Chelsea game, and we did promise on Twitter that the late arrival of today's podcast would be worth it. And your prediction, I'm sure, is going to be worth it, Simon, because your Chelsea one certainly was. Predictions. I'm going to come to you last, Simon, because you're going to kind of finish this part of the podcast off with probably the wildest take we've ever heard. But Justin.
Yeah, I'm going to go 2-1. In our favour, I'm going with you. Lyle Foster celebrates his new contract with a couple of crackers. Why not?
Excellent. I'm going to go with the exact same scoreline, 2-1. Brace for Lyle Foster, because I think we're going to be chanting Waka Waka. I'm going to be dancing around the living room shouting Waka Waka, and next door's dogs are going to be wondering what the hell's going on. Go on then, Simon. We know how good you are at this little game.
I'm going to say that it's a very, very ugly, scrappy game, but this time we do stay in it, and then in the final minute, Nathan Redmond pops up with a curling free kick into the top corner that almost really robs Bournemouth of a result that they deserve more from that game. I think they could feel a bit disappointed, Bournemouth, but we've run away with 3 points thanks to Nathan, capping an excellent 90-minute performance from the Fortune and Southampton midfielder.
It's a very, very specific prediction, that, isn't it? Yeah. Very specific. Which corner is he putting it in?
Keeper's top left. Yeah.
And he's done all right at right back for now.
Visualization. It's vision.
Yeah.
Right back, I'm not sure if he's maybe moved into a midfield role after that early experiment didn't work out at right back.
we can only hope. So, clean sweep then. 3 points. Clean sweep. I think we admit it's not going to be the toughest. It's not going to be the easiest of games, I should say. No, slight faux pas there, and perhaps not going to be the best game for the neutral. But we think we might have lift off. Excellent stuff. Well, we'll be back after a very short break to discuss the news that Burnley's owners, ALK Capital, are in talks with Dundee of the Scottish Premiership about a talent sharing agreement. We'll try and make sense of that after this. Right then, so a report last night from on the Daily Mail online. Sammy Mockbell, who's their chief football writer, I think is Sammy, usually pretty reliable when it comes to off the field Burnley stuff. I know he's broken a couple of bits. Reported last night that ALK Capital are in talks with Dundee for the Scottish Premiership side to become a feeder club. Sammy's report says he's understood discussions over the collaboration have taken place in recent weeks in a deal that would initially see the clubs enter into a talent share agreement. If ratified, the venture could see Burnley secure first refusal on Dundee's best players. Similarly, the deal would also see Burnley's most talented youngsters head north of the border to gain valuable first-team experience. Marcel Lewis, of course, former Accrington Stanley and Union Saint-Gilloise player who's featured for our youth team, but not the first team yet, I don't think. He's already up there on loan. I'm not sure if he's started any games for Dundee. Dundee currently 10th in the Premiership in Scotland, which I thought, that's not too bad. And then I realised there's only 12 teams in it. Simon, we were against... I'm trying not to be too flippant. We were against largely initially buying Kortrijk, and that kind of deal collapsed twice by the looks of things with Vincent Tan currently in charge at Kortrijk, and I think that deal went as far as us dictating some of their transfer targets in the summer window. That's how close we were to buying them in a £13 million deal. Does this feel more sensible? It doesn't look like there's much of a financial agreement. It should be said we have already got 3 agreements, if that's the right term, with I can't even remember who they were bloody with. Like
Air United FC,
it was Air United and someone in Ireland. I can't remember. Landudno, yeah. Does this feel like something we should be doing? I mean, we're taking the piss a little bit because of Dundee's form this season, but we have sent players north, haven't we? I remember Jay Rodriguez going north and getting some much-needed experience before coming back and carving out his first-team career.
Yeah. I mean, look, the problem with these things is, like, tell me one really good example of where it's worked in football. You know, these big agreements and partnerships between clubs and stuff, they always sound fantastic and they always sound a little bit revolutionary and so on. They very, very rarely actually deliver much. I think Manchester United, there's a few teams that have had deals with Belgian clubs over the years because of maybe the EU rules or something. I don't know, but it very rarely works. I mean, if Chris was on the pod today, he'd be telling you about that great agreement we had in North Carolina with the Railhawks. Yeah, Carolina Railhawks and the Cary Clarets and all this kind of stuff. They don't deliver a lot usually. So what does it mean? What kind of agreement is it really? Is it, right, we're going to sit down with this club and say, right, okay, we've got too many players in our squad. Our younger players need to be playing better football than they get with the development team. We're going to send you 4 players a year. Look after them, please. And in return, we'll send you a coach up there to keep an eye on them. And by the way, in return, if you have any brilliant young players, we want them on the cheap and have first option on them. I mean, I don't see how that can do any harm. Is it involving us actually buying a stake in the club or anything more than that? I don't know.
I think it is. I think according to that report, there's talks about us investing or taking a stake in the club. I'm not sure whether it's like, with a view to eventually taking the whole thing over, but there is a suggestion we might put some money in there.
Yeah, it does say sources have indicated Burnley's American owners have shown interest in a possible financial investment into the Dens Park outfit with a view to securing a stake in the club, but such an agreement has been described as premature from figures close to the ongoing talks. It does look like ALK are still wanting to dip into the old, City Football Group-esque arrangement with some teams. Yeah. As Simon says there, Justin, where's the success? I can't think of anybody who's kind of been, obviously City used New York FC to get Lampard, via that route as a bit of a kind of a swizzle, shall we say? But it's not.
Well, that's not why they bought New York City FC.
No, I know it's not, but it's kind of like a helpful thing. I'm not suggesting we're going to end up getting Messi via Dundee or anything like that because he fancies a slice of Dundee cake and a bit of time up in a bonny Scottish city, but. It does feel like these things are, quite nice as a talking point, probably more beneficial to Dundee if it means that they get some of our younger players, as long as they get action, then perhaps it builds it better for us and our development teams. But as long as it doesn't prove too much of a distraction, it's not the end of the world if we enter into an agreement like this, is it?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I can't see it being all that productive. All of our best teenagers are playing in the first team every week at the moment, so I don't know who they'll get. But I think we've talked about this before, haven't we? That the owners, we've seen the when they're pitching for investment in the US, they tout this structure that they want to put in place where they have not just one feeder club, but a series of feeder clubs at different levels, with Burnley at the top of that pyramid. And, it can be of benefit to some of these players to get games that are more competitive than the ones that they're going to be playing in if they stay at Burnley and are not in the first team. But my issue with all this, and I've said this before, is that we already have a way of doing this. We already have a way of finding, competitive games for players that aren't getting a look in the first team at Burnley, and that's the loan system. And the benefit of that is you can find the right spot for the right player at the right time under the right circumstances. And for every single club that I know of, that has been the way that they have given their young talent a bit of experience before they bring them back to the club and then get them integrated into the first team. I suppose, what you'd need for there to be any benefit to it all is to try and set up a system, an environment and a playing style and a system that mirrors exactly that of the parent club. But football just doesn't work like that, does it? What works in the Scottish Premier League, or doesn't work in Dundee's case, by the sound of it, doesn't necessarily work for what you do in the Premier League. But I think, and also you got when City's owners do it, they've got like more or less an unlimited amount of money to throw at it, haven't they? They're not investing in these clubs as cash cows to sort of put, make money out of it in that sense. So, and our owners clearly don't have that vast, massive resource behind them.
It doesn't even work for City that well.
Well, it doesn't do that thing that they want it to do they? But I think running one football club and keeping it afloat is difficult enough. I don't know why we want to spread ourselves over more than one football club. But these stories do keep cropping up, don't they? So, I think it's inevitable that we'll end up sealing the deal on one of these eventually, and then, we'll see how it works.
I'm surprised if they really want to have another club, and the Belgian thing suggests that they do. This sounds a little bit more like those kind of agreements that the Air United and Clarets does things, doesn't it? But if they actually really want to buy another club, I don't know why they don't look at Eastern Europe, because you can buy a club with a rich history who've played in the European Champions League or UEFA Cup and so on for the cost of like an England under-21 goalkeeper who's only ever played in League One. You know, you can own the whole club and the stadium and everything. I mean, it's still a lot cheaper over there to buy football clubs than it is in Western Europe. And you could get.
But that was the beauty of the treat deal, wasn't it? It was 13 million quid.
Yeah.
You could buy the club for 13 million quid. It's like you said, it's a summer signing, isn't it? It's it's a cost-effective way.
There's a lot of maintenance on it, but no, I mean, but the good point that Justin raised though about finding the right club for the right player at the right time and so on. Because if you have a situation where you have a young right winger, let's say, if you're a young right winger at Burnley, there's an awful lot of people in front of you in the queue at the moment, and quite a lot of them are young as well. So if you're looking to find a home for that player, you find a club that plays with a winger. And plays a similar style of football or gets it on the ground to wide players often, and where they're going to play, where they're actually going to play. Because the problem with a lot of loan deals is that the players go and don't play and come back, and it's done them no good whatsoever. It's done nobody any good. If that player is forced to go to Dundee because we have an agreement in place, and the club are like, no, they've got to go to Dundee, these kind of players. And Dundee already have a right winger, or they don't need that player. I mean, presumably that's where it starts to break down, because we then have to loan him to somewhere else. So it's very tricky to find this big one-size-fits-all sort of solution to it. And a lot of clubs have. I don't think Burnley has one. I'm not sure. I might be wrong. But a lot of clubs now have loan managers.
Charlie Adam, I think, isn't it? Is Charlie Adam still the loan manager? I think I'm almost certain he's still the loan manager. I think I saw something on Up the Clarets that he'd done an interview with BBC Radio Lancashire recently about his role as the loans manager.
Right. Okay, that's good to know, because that's a smart thing. I think that's one of those modern innovations in football that I talked to Neil Adams, who used to do it at Norwich, about that job once, and he went into a lot of detail about it. And it really is about trying to find the right fit, but also about managing the loan itself and keeping on top of that player and having regular report backs and conversations and all the rest of it, because it's an asset you've got, an investment. Now, you know, I just, you know, you can say it doesn't do any harm, but if it starts to force players to go to clubs that don't make sense for them, it does do harm, doesn't it? So I don't know. I think in some ways it sounds like they're falling between options here, because do they really want to buy another club and develop that as a potential money-making venture, or do they want to find a solution to where to loan young players who aren't getting a game? They might be two different things they need to be looking at, those.
Definitely. I know Chelsea get a lot of stick, and I've had a lot of stick for having a lot of players, but they kind of did that successfully, didn't they? If you think about the players they sent out on loan to Derby, for instance, when Frank Lampard was there, the likes of Mason Mount and the striker whose name Tammy Abraham, you know, they went out on loan successfully. Maatsen, you could argue, not quite a first-team regular at the minute, but getting Premier League minutes, has had two very successful spells out on loan at Coventry and Burnley. The kind of loan system, if you will, Justin, as you suggested, is feels like the kind of, it don't cost you anything. You know, it's not like we've got a manager who doesn't have contacts. I'm sure he's got, you know, pretty much everyone in the Championship kind of on speed dial, people ringing him up asking for players. McNally played well. You know, he's starting to get into a settled Stoke side. I think they beat Leeds this midweek as well. Clean sheet against Leeds, who've been in a bit of form recently. You know, it does feel like there is already options available, but I'm sure we'll come back to that. We should just mention as well, very briefly, again, just a couple of filings with the various companies that make up the ownership structure of Burnley Football Club's group of companies, suggesting that there's been some injection of cash from somewhere. There's a couple of different figures of 78 million and 80 million going into some of the kind of reserves accounts, I think they are, which means that money can then be spent by the directors as they see fit. Now, we don't don't 100% know, and we are, still digging to kind of try and find out what that is. As ever, we'll point over to our friends at Up the Clarets, Paul Wayne, Chester Perry, Aggie, a few of the others who seem to have a bit more of a handle on that. There is a thread on the Up the Clarets message board, which, if you've not caught up on that, it's well worth looking at. There is a few people speculating as to what this money can be. Is it the investment that we've seen? We know there's been a fundraising drive. We've seen that, JJ Watt coming on board. There's also the revelation that the ex-Everton chief financial officer, who we announced as a director, whose name I'm never going to be able to pronounce, the Russian fella, who came from Everton, very highly rated, I should say, when we chatted to some Everton sources, very highly rated and competent at what he did. And it seems that all the financial struggles at Everton appear to stem from after his departure. It now looks like he's got a fairly big shareholding in one of the Burnley companies as well now. So, does that money come from that? We just don't know. There is a financial picture that is emerging that certainly, if it is new investment, does look a hell of a lot rosier than perhaps we felt like the financials were. Maybe this is the result of Alan Pace's innovative ownership structure, which he talked about right at the start. We've speculated it's perhaps a little bit like a horse racing syndicate, where if you don't have the millions to own a football club outright, then there is a vehicle, and the vehicle owns the football club, and the vehicle can then be invested into. I don't know about you guys. I'm no financial expert. I struggle kind of working out my shopping bills most weeks, but it appears that if there's plus money going into accounts, it can't be a bad thing, can it, Simon?
Well, that definitely is the model. We know that is what they're trying to do. And Alan Pace said that right at the start. I had a little chat with him when he was in the process of buying the club, and that's how he explained it to me directly. Was there are a lot of people in America who would like to invest in soccer. We think the sport is undervalued and has got tremendous growth potential, but they don't want to expose themselves to the commitment and risk involved in becoming owners themselves. And that does make sense, in a lot of ways. What I don't like about this, though, is that we have to go onto the Clarets into a long thread, and we have to read, Chester Perry and people like that who've done incredible amount of research and do know it and go on Companies House and so on. There should be, I'm not a fan of this whole football regulator thing, but there should be a mechanism whereby fans of a football club know a little bit more than they do about who owns and where the money's coming from and so on. It usually comes out in the end, but there really should be a much more clear way. I don't know why does it have to be so obtuse and so secretive, really? If somebody's made an investment in the club, that's good news, isn't it? I mean,
yeah, I can kind of understand the secrecy from a personal privacy point of view, and I think the problem with kind of buying a stake directly in the football club, as we found out with our man, our ex-Everton man, when the confirmation statement comes out, you could see everybody who owns any shares and how many shares that they have in that club. By investing in the vehicle, you're kind of protecting yourself from that public scrutiny, but it does create intrigue. JJ Watt, I'm not an NFL fan, never really got into it, but whenever I speak to people who are much more in the know, JJ Watt and Tom Brady, also a British football club owner, probably the next two nominees for the NFL Hall of Fame. So big names like that. You do wonder who else is in there. As his appearance on Jimmy Fallon suddenly got Jimmy Fallon to part with 10 million quid because he enjoyed the Benny and Brandy so much. You just wonder who is part of this kind of syndicate. This is what it creates. But so I get the secrecy. People don't want to expose themselves as having invested and things like that. But maybe we do start seeing the odd character crop up in the director's box at Turf Moor and things like that. But
Yeah.
Justin, what's your view on the financials? Just quickly before we go.
I'm a bit like you in the sense that, you know, these aren't numbers that you can count on your fingers. So it's all goes way above my head. We've said this before, haven't we? I'm not an accountant, but now I'm going to talk about the money side of the situation. So I'll be brief, and I'll say I totally agree with Simon. And on your point about secrecy, I think that when you buy into a football club, you buy into a unique kind of business that has people who have invested in it throughout their whole lives, and that's the fans. And the fans of the club are the real owners of the club. The people who own the club on paper now, you know, they could be out of it within the next 10 years or so. Whereas for the likes of us, we're stuck with it for the rest of our lives. And I think if you're going to invest in a business like that, you sort of forfeit that right to privacy. You know, you with the fans deserve to know who are the custodians of the club that they have invested their lives in, not just money, but their lives in. And I think that it's really important to distinguish this from a what you might call a normal business. People are invested in it in ways that aren't just pumping cash into it.
I don't care who has 20% ownership of Tesco. I don't care, and nobody cares really. But I do care about Burnley, and it's not just the curiosity. I mean, sometimes you can read these things online and you think people are just curious for curious sake, aren't they? Like, who's put money in us? But it does matter, because if it starts to ever go wrong, you know, those people are going to make decisions which will have a massive impact on the football club, which, as Justin says, is a community asset. You know, so
absolutely.
I think there does need to be better try. I think it might come in. I don't know whether it's going to come in with the regulator or with other things. But I think there will start to be pressure where, when you see things go wrong at football clubs, there's usually an extremely complicated ownership structure that people start pulling to pieces and going, "Oh, hold on a minute, we didn't know he owned the ground, or he owned half of this," or, you know. So the problem with setting up that company around it as the vehicle, as you say, is that it removes that away from it. They're not necessarily then directors of the club. We've seen a few new names appear as directors of the clubs over the last year or so, but you know, it removes that degree of accountability as well, doesn't it? You know, so I'd like to know more. I think that we should know more about it. I mean, and if it's going well, this is not necessarily a negative or an anti-ALK or PACE point to make. If it's going well and the investments are coming in, great. Tell us about it then. Tell us. You know, if for some reason somebody has got a big privacy concern, I don't know why they would do, but if somebody has a big privacy concern, fine, just tell us, you know, an American businessman has invested 15 million in our club or something. I think, you know, the problem, and they will discover this more and more as they carry on as Burnley owners. The more secretive you are, the wilder the speculation will get in Burnley. You know, and we know what the town's like. You know, it'll if it's going well, then you know, Barack Obama's probably invested in the club. Like if it's going,
That's what I'd heard. Yeah.
If it's going badly, then it gets like, you know, lurid talks about bankruptcy and all that kind of stuff. So it probably does serve their interests in terms of their relationship with the fans to have that degree more transparency, I think.
Definitely. Well, let's leave it there. Let's hope we are back on Monday with a positive debrief. I know I said that last week, so I might have jinxed it and put all our wild predictions to the sword there. But thank you very much, chaps. Don't forget, you can rate, review, share, like us on your podcast platforms. We were troubling the top 50 of the Apple Great British Soccer podcasts up against some of the biggest boys in town, which was great this week. Again, we're often kind of hanging around there, and your reviews, your ratings, your listens, your shares, etc. do help. And do follow us on social media. We have got a couple of exciting things coming up to reveal over the next few weeks on social media. So Beehole Podcast on Twitter, X and Facebook, to make sure that you're first for those. Until next time, see you soon. Enjoy the game on Saturday, and up the Clarets.